champagne flute shattered against the marble floor of the Grand Horizon Hotel, sending crystal shards skittering across the polished surface like fallen stars. Maya stood frozen, her designer dress suddenly feeling too tight, her breath caught somewhere between her throat and her breaking heart. Because there, across the crowded ballroom filled with the city's elite, stood the man she had dismissed 3 years ago, the man she had called a failure, a dreamer with empty pockets, now being honored as the keynote speaker at the city's most prestigious humanitarian gala. David Chen. The name echoed in her mind like a ghost from a past she had tried so hard to forget. It had been a rainy Tuesday afternoon when she had ended things. David had shown up at her office, his clothes damp from the downpour, his shoes worn at the edges, carrying a small bouquet of grocery store flowers. He had wanted to take her to dinner to celebrate her promotion, but Maya had looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing but embarrassment. Her colleagues were dating lawyers, entrepreneurs, men who drove expensive cars and wore watches that cost more than most people's monthly rent. And there was David, working at some nonprofit she barely understood, living in a tiny apartment, riding the bus because he couldn't afford a car. She had ended it right there, in the lobby of her building, with rain streaming down the glass walls around them. She told him she needed someone with ambition, someone going places, someone who could match her lifestyle. She would never forget the look in his eyes, not anger but a deep, quiet sadness that made her turn away. There's 7 if you believe in second chances, in the power of kindness over material wealth. Take a moment right now to like this video, leave a comment about a time someone surprised you, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more stories that matter. Maya had moved on quickly, or so she thought. She dated Marcus, a hedge fund manager with a penthouse view and a collection of sports cars. They went to the finest restaurants, vacationed in Monaco, and she posted photos that made her life look like a magazine spread. But something was always missing. Marcus checked his phone during their dinners, spoke about people as if they were investments to be leveraged, and never once asked Maya about her dreams, her fears, or what made her laugh until her stomach hurt. Still, she convinced herself this was what success looked like. This was what she deserved after years of working her way up from a small town to the corporate tower, where she now held a vice president title. Then came the invitation to the gala. Her company was a sponsor, and attendance was mandatory for executives. She had barely glanced at the program until she was seated at her table, half-heartedly listening to the opening speeches. That's when she heard his name. David Chen, founder and CEO of Hope Bridge International, being honored for his revolutionary work in sustainable community development across Southeast Asia. The room erupted in applause and Maya's world tilted on its axis. She watched him walk to the stage, and her breath caught. He looked different, more confident, perhaps his shoulders squared, but there was something else. That same gentle warmth in his eyes, that same humble smile. He began to speak, and the entire ballroom fell silent. David talked about growing up poor, about watching his mother work 3 jobs to keep their family afloat, about understanding poverty not as a concept, but as a lived reality that shaped every decision, every dream. He spoke about starting Hope Bridge with nothing but a laptop and a conviction that sustainable change required working with communities, not for them. Maya's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass. She remembered now. Those nights David had come to her apartment exhausted, talking passionately about a project he was building, about villages that needed clean water systems, about teaching financial literacy to women who had never had access to banking. She had barely listened, scrolling through her phone, suggesting he get a real job with a real salary. She had seen his passion as naivety, his dedication as foolishness. David continued, his voice steady but filled with emotion. He talked about the night his funding proposal was rejected by the 47th investor, about sitting in his apartment wondering if he should give up, about a conversation with someone who told him he was wasting his time chasing impossible dreams. Maya's face burned. She knew he was talking about her, even if no one else in the room did. But then his voice shifted, growing stronger. He talked about how that moment became his turning point, how he decided that if traditional investors wouldn't support his vision, he would prove them wrong by starting small, by documenting every success, by building a model so undeniable that the world would have to pay attention. The presentation screen behind him lit up with images, clean water flowing from new wells, children in classrooms built by Hope Bridge, women proudly displaying their business licenses, entire villages transformed. The statistics were staggering. In 3 years, Hope Bridge had impacted over 200,000 lives across 6 countries. Major foundations and tech billionaires were now backing his work. David had been featured in Time magazine, advised governments, and turned down lucrative consulting offers because he refused to compromise his mission. The room gave him a standing ovation that seemed to last forever. Maya couldn't stand. Her legs wouldn't support her. She thought about Marcus, about the empty conversations and hollow achievements, about how she had traded something real for something shiny. She thought about the David she had known, bringing her soup when she was sick, remembering every small detail she mentioned, supporting her dreams even when she never asked about his. She had seen his poverty but missed his wealth of character. She had seen his worn shoes but missed the fact that he was walking towards something meaningful while she was running on a treadmill of material gain going nowhere. After the ceremony, Maya found herself standing in the hallway outside the ballroom, her heart pounding. She knew she had no right to approach him, no right to apologize after the cruelty of her dismissal. But her feet moved anyway, drawn by regret and a desperate need for closure. David was surrounded by admirers, but somehow across the crowd his eyes found hers. For a moment, time stopped. Then someone pulled him away for photos, and the moment passed. Maya left the gala early, driving through the city streets she thought she knew so well, seeing them differently now. She passed the park where David had once tried to explain his vision for Hope Bridge, where she had yawned and suggested they go shopping instead. She drove past the library where he had spent countless hours researching, planning, building his impossible dream into reality. Every landmark held a memory of her blindness, her superficiality, her fundamental misunderstanding of what made a life valuable. The next morning, Maya did something she hadn't done in years. She took a day off work and went to the Hope Bridge office, a modest space in a renovated community center, nothing like the glass towers she was used to. The receptionist, a young woman who radiated purpose, asked if she had an appointment. Maya stammered something about wanting to volunteer to learn about their work. The receptionist smiled warmly and handed her a brochure. As Maya sat in the simple waiting area, she watched staff members moving with focused energy, their conversations filled with genuine excitement about projects and people, not profit margins and stock options. David emerged from a conference room, laughing with a colleague. He stopped when he saw her. For a long moment, they just looked at each other across the space that represented everything she had failed to see 3 years ago. Then David walked over, and what he said changed everything. He didn't ask why she was there or remind her of her rejection. Instead, he smiled. That same kind smile she had once taken for granted, and said something that would stay with her forever. He said that everyone's journey moves at different speeds, that we all have to figure out what truly matters in our own time, and that the door to doing meaningful work is always open for those ready to walk through it. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think about the choices we make and the values we hold, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and let us know in the comments what success really means to you. Dr. Maya began volunteering with Hope Bridge, not to win David back. That bridge had burned from her own match, but because she finally understood what he had tried to show her all along. That true wealth is measured not in bank accounts, but in lives touched. That real ambition isn't climbing corporate ladders, but lifting others up. That the poverty she should have feared was never in his wallet, but could have been in her soul. Months later, on a trip to document a new clean water project, Maya stood in a village watching children drink from a well that David's organization had built. An elderly woman took her hand and said, through a translator, that this well meant her granddaughters could go to school instead of walking miles for water. In that moment, Maya understood the cost of her earlier blindness and the grace of her second chance to see clearly. Comment below if you believe that true wealth is measured in love, purpose, and impact, not just money. Jealous as she never did get David back. He had moved forward, was dating someone who had stood by him during his building years, someone who saw his worth from the beginning. But Maya found something perhaps more valuable. She found herself, the person she was meant to be before ambition had twisted into something hollow. She left her corporate job and joined Hope Bridge full-time, taking a fraction of her previous salary and finding a richness she had never known existed. Sometimes at the office, she and David would share a smile of mutual understanding, two people who had taken different roads to arrive at the same truth. The real tragedy, Maya often thought, wasn't that she had rejected him for being poor. It was that she had been the poor one all along, bankrupt in the ways that mattered, and too blind to see the treasure standing right in front of her. Wearing worn shoes and carrying a heart full of impossible dreams,